English translation, 392nd contact. Saturday, 25th of June 2005, 1631 HRs.
Be greeted, my fatherly friend. I see you surprised.
Indeed I am, girl, for Ptah did not tell me that you were with him today. But be you also warmly welcomed and greeted, you too, Ptah, dear friend.
Florena's visit was to be a surprise, which apparently succeeded. But also my greetings are given to you.
It would be a pleasure for me to address you with 2 questions, one of which was asked by Zaphanet Paniach.
Of course, there is really no question.
If it pleases you, Florina, I will close my ears or go out for the time of questions and their answers.
There is no need to go out or to close your ears, Ptah, because for you the questions and their answers should not be a secret. Only I want to make it a condition that my questions and your answers, dear friend Billy, will not be recorded in writing later, because everything is strictly personal.
That goes without saying, dear friend, if I may call you that.
It is a very great honor for me if you call me your friend.
Many thanks.
Then I want to put forward my questions, and when you have given the answers, I want to leave you alone to enjoy a little walk outside. So these are the first questions. They are a bit longer to explain. If I may take your advice?
Excuse me a moment, Florina. There was a knock on the door just now, so I have to go and see who is outside. Unfortunately, I did not close the doors at Eva's office. It was Philia. She thought she heard Eva talking and wanted to see her. Apparently she heard you, Florina, talking.
Did I speak too loud?
I am sure you did not. It was my fault because I did not lock the doors and I just made up for it. Because in a few minutes Eva will surely be back too.
Then I will now continue with my questions.
I am honored to be advising you and Zaphanet Paniach. Now, in answer to your questions, let me say this.
Thank you very much for your advice, also on behalf of Zaphanat Paniach. Then I want to go and do some outdoor exercise. Goodbye, Billy, dear friend, and let me give you a hug. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Florina, dear friend, and off she goes.
Florina is really a very lovely young woman, and her trust in you is very great, which is why she wanted to ask you the questions and not me. And as for the advice you gave, it was very valuable for her and Zaphanat Paniach. In fact, I do not know if I would have found the same good words to answer the questions as you did.
My opinion is that you would have phrased and said the whole thing just as well, and speaking of formulating, would you formulate and explain something for me? But first I have one more question, if I may.
If it corresponds to my ability, I would like to formulate something for you. What is it about? But what other question do you have that seems important to you?
It is about tsunamis. On 26 December 2004, the Great Seaquake and Tsunami Catastrophe occurred in Indonesia, whereby, as you have clarified, 359,596 humans ultimately lost their lives. In contrast to this, it is officially claimed that the number of victims was only around 300,000. The process of the seabed warping or seaquake has taken more than 2,700 years, as you said. Is that correct?
Your information is correct. It was 2,114 years exactly. And as for the number of victims of the disaster, our figures are correct down to the last digit.
I have no doubt. But now my real question. In an unofficial conversation, you said that such seaquakes with huge seabed faults always occur over longer periods of time, because the tensions of the Earth's crust often build up over a very long period of time, whereby centuries or 1, 2, or even 3 millennia are not uncommon. In addition, as you have explained, the quake waves travel through the Earth's interior at a speed of about 15,000 kilometers per hour. And in the case of strong quakes, surface waves also appear, and in such a wise that the Earth's surface moves visibly in a running wave form. I understood that correctly, did I not?
You will not succumb to any misunderstanding.
Then I want to ask you, when was the last major seaquake disaster of equal or worse magnitude before the tsunami disaster in Indonesia, or the Bay of Bengal and Sumatra and Thailand, etc.? Do you know about that?
The last such catastrophe occurred on the 26th of January 1700, exactly at 21 HARs in the Northwest Pacific off the American Northwest coast. It was such a violent seaquake, which created a very large fault in the sea and created a tsunami that spread in all directions and caused a lot of disaster. Especially the northwest coast of America was devastated far into the country, destroying large areas of forest. The tsunami waters continued to roll southwards and reached the islands from Hawaii to Micronesia, where the islands also suffered great destruction and loss of life, as was the case in the north of America. The gigantic tsunami also swept across the Pacific Ocean to Japan, where the wild waters also caused great disaster, as well as on certain parts of the Chinese coast, etc.
Was this the only major seaquake with large tsunamis since the seaquake disaster in Indonesia began 2,714 years ago?
No, because there have been others of a similar magnitude. For example, it is recorded in our annals that 2,600 years ago, that is to say 600 BC, as well as 400 AD and 700 AD, the same great events occurred from the Pacific Ocean.
And are more such events to be expected?
Undoubtedly, because such mega seaquakes which cause huge tsunamis are already in the making. Probably the biggest will also occur in the Northwest Pacific, along with others in Indonesia.
You are cutting back on information and explanations.
According to our predictions, a seaquake of magnitude 9 on the Richter scale will cause a gigantic fault line of several hundred kilometers in the North Pacific area, not far from the American coast, from Portland and Southern California up to Washington in the north. The seaquake will last for about 5 minutes, after which many more and lighter quakes will follow and also trigger a smaller tsunami. Some facts concerning this imminent danger are known to earthly scientists, but they are not able to grasp the catastrophe that is really occurring.
I can imagine, because our scientists are usually narrow-minded and often live with misconceptions. But tell me, when will the monstrous thing happen?
It will happen but you have to keep quiet about it.
Clearly my mouth is sealed. Thanks for the information. Then to the other thing. I have been accused on several occasions of simply copying old teachings of old religion founders, philosophers, prophets, and wise ones. This both in terms of the teaching of life and in terms of the spiritual teaching, aka creation energy teaching. Now this has happened again, so I think that it would be good if you would say a frank word about it. In doing so, I think that perhaps you could raise your word in such a wise as to give an open account of the effective facts and reality. What is your opinion? We could also turn your public statement into a small brochure, if you can agree to that.
I like your suggestion. Yes, I would like to take a stand on the attacks directed at you. Let me think about that for a moment. Yes, I think it is important to say this.
Billy's teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching, aka creation energy teaching, are not products of modern times, but lead back to the most distant primeval times of the human beings, to Nocodemian and Enoch, the founders of the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching, which deal with the creational laws and recommendations as well as the creational natural laws as they are given in the life and in nature. Billy's teaching does not refer to something new, but to the traditional teaching of life and to the spiritual teaching as it was created by Nocodemian and Enoch and handed down from the same great line of prophets to the present day. The teaching of the life refers to all the facts of the human existence, the consciousness-based and overall mental evolution, but also to the virtues, the development of the personality and of the character, the right lifestyle, interpersonal relationships and partnership, etc., etc. The spiritual teaching, on the other hand, is directed to all creational and natural law-based matters in every respect, as well as to the creational recommendations which are suggestions for the observance in order to do justice to the laws of the creation. In ancient times, the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching were only presented according to the respective understanding of the earlier humans of that time, whereby many words and terms had to be used which were familiar to the humans at that time, and inevitably led to misunderstandings, despite the laborious attempts of the old prophets to explain them. In modern times, however, the old terms and words have lost their validity due to the modern languages and have been or will be replaced by new terms and words that correspond to the understanding of the human beings of the modern age. In the old times, when the human beings were not yet very well educated, in general, it was impossible to explain and teach the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching in such a comprehensive language and in such a detailed and explanatory manner to those interested, as is possible today with the much better languages, which are more comprehensive in wording. If the whole of the old teaching material is examined in detail, it must be said that the old teaching material, as a result of the linguistic expressions, was presented in a wise that in itself can be described as very banal. This is also proven by the very often extremely banal teachings and expressions of innumerable ancient prophets of various directions, as well as by the ancient sages and philosophers whose traditional works are brimming with banality. The old prophets, philosophers, sages and founders of religions, etc. could not satisfy the explanations of the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching, because they knew the one and the other teaching only from hearsay, and on the other hand, they could only offer them according to the understanding of the humans of the earlier times. But even this was often too much, which is why the proclaimers of the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching were often persecuted, threatened and even killed, especially with regard to the lineage of the prophet Nokodemian Hinnock. But this has been preserved up to the present day, which is why true proclaimers continue to be persecuted and threatened, including assassinations, while false prophets are glorified, worshipped, legally protected and left unchecked as religious leaders of sects, etc. True proclaimers or prophets have been frowned upon since time immemorial and are still frowned upon today, because humanity neither wants to hear nor knowingly take note of the effective truth. So it is also the case that humans who believe themselves to be very smart and clever, even today, denigrate true proclaimers or prophets and their teachings in every possible manner and make stupid sayings about them, such as, for example, these are only old-fashioned teachings, as they have already been brought by this or that prophet, wise man, founder of religion and philosopher, etc., etc. These vilifying people, however, do not recognize in their self-delusion and in their self-importance that the respective teachings are being reprocessed and presented to the human beings of modern times in a detailed and explanatory manner according to the latest knowledge and understanding, whereby all banality of words, terms and forms of interpretation as well as inadequate explanations of the earlier times are sorted out. Just as in earlier times everything has resulted with regard to the persecution and threat to the prophets, so in every respect exactly the same ensues also in the present time. Because in the same wise know-it-alls make the same stupid speeches and believe that with their meager knowledge they are above everything and above all other humans. And indeed, such self-important know-it-alls believe that they must criticize Billy's new presentation of the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching in great knowledge and wisdom, and degrade it to a simple repetition of the traditional teachings of old religion founders, wise men, prophets, and philosophers. Their minds are not sufficient to recognize that Billy's teaching is far more advanced, comprehensive, and explanatory than ever before of all the teachings of the philosophers, sages, founders of religion, and prophets of former times. Nonetheless, these mindless ones believe they are called to criticize and denigrate a very great and hard work of a denunciator, although it is obvious that their minds are not sufficient to grasp even a small part of the real truth. This is also true of those who claim to be very well read, but for whom the penny has not dropped in order to realize that both the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching, as Billy teaches and explains it in a comprehensive manner, has never been taught on the earth. He teaches in such a detailed wise and explains everything so clearly as it has never been since ancient times, surpassing all the traditional banal teachings of the old and ancient times to such an extent that no comparison can be made at all. Billy's teaching, in its detail and comprehensibility, is a work that cannot be compared with the teachings, statements, and explanations of the ancient prophets, sages, and philosophers. Furthermore, his teaching is not based on hackneyed, stupid phrases, as many are based on old so-called wisdom teachings, but they have demonstrably got their hands and feet, fundaments, and testify to a comprehensive knowledge and understanding as well as great wisdom with regard to the whole matter of the teaching of life and the spiritual teaching. Contrary to the old teachings of the old prophets, sages, founders of religion, and philosophers, Billy's teaching shows a fundamental depth in a comprehensive understanding, whereby he is able to explain everything down to the smallest detail to such an extent that no misunderstandings can arise. A fact that the old sages, founders of religion, and philosophers as well as many old prophets missed. Billy's spirit form originates from the oldest and most famous line of prophets on the earth, Nocodemian and Enoch. And what he brings, teaches, and accomplishes with his teaching in modern times is the continuation of the ancient teachings of the life and spirit from the pen of the earliest prophets Nocodemian and Enoch. So he does not bring a new teaching of life, but the most ancient teaching of life, which he explains comprehensively and in detail according to the understanding of the human beings of the modern times. As no proclaimer of his own line of prophets before him, no other prophet of another line, no wise human, no philosopher, and no founder of a religion has done. Therefore, when self-proclaimed wise ones claim that Billy's teachings are nothing more than the teachings of old wise men, prophets, philosophers, and founders of religion, etc., this cannot be accepted or claimed in any wise, because it is simply not true. In fact, no prophet, wise one, or philosopher, etc. has ever appeared before Billy who has presented the teaching of the life and the spiritual teaching in such a comprehensive and detailed and explanatory wise as he can claim. So there can be no question of him simply reproducing the old and inadequate teachings of the old wise men, prophets and philosophers, etc., because this simply does not correspond to the truth, because he basically brings immeasurably much more with his teaching than has ever been done before by other proclaimers. This is not least because, at least in his line of prophets, the former proclaimers on the earth could not explain the teaching and the whole truth about life and about the creational laws and recommendations as well as the creational natural laws, etc. to the former and still very uneducated human beings, because the former humans simply lacked the necessary knowledge and understanding. But when self-proclaimed know-it-alls nevertheless claim that Billy simply reproduces the traditional teachings of various prophets, wise men and philosophers as well as founders of religion, then he is maliciously denigrated and slandered, not only with regard to his work and mission, but also in his person, honesty and dignity.
These are the facts I have to explain. More may well be superfluous, and moreover, it must be said that all those ignorant, know-it-alls and adversaries who continue to accuse and insult you slanderously in the manner I have mentioned will not be dissuaded from their wrongdoing even by my truthful words, because their self-importance is too great, and their intelligence is not sufficient to recognize and understand the actual reality and truth.
It will certainly be like this. With your words, the fact and truth is satisfied, so that we can let the ones of low intelligentum spoon out their own soup of their own lack of understanding, their dullness, doltishness, blindness, and their foolishness.
In a nutshell. You always find apt words to describe the facts. I feel the need to acquire this ability as well. Now, I would like to tell you a little bit more about what I was talking about last Saturday regarding the power failures in Switzerland, because the series continues on the 27th of June. So this time, the public energy network in the canton of Neuchâtel will be affected by a power failure, and it will be caused by a lightning strike. There will also be a breakdown at the post office, and electronic payments will collapse for some time. Another energy disruption will occur in the Bernese Oberland, but also in Basel, where a high-voltage line is also hit by a lightning strike and causes a power failure.
What I would be interested in is the weather in Europe and the world. What is the result?
In various states of the world, a time of great drought and aridity is being forecast. This means that temperatures will rise very high in the coming weeks, which, as in previous years, will also lead to a considerable number of heat deaths and crop failures in various states. While unusually violent storms and equally violent floods will cause a lot of disaster in China, as in Australia and other countries, which will also affect Europe, there will also be devastating forest fires in many places in various states, but this will be relatively within the normal, usual range. The plague will also break out again in Asia, although it will not spread and fortunately claim only a few victims. But now, dear friend, I must go my way because I still have a lot of work to do. Next Saturday I will be here again punctually for the correction, whereby I might have something new to explain regarding predictions.
Then I will not keep you. Farewell, my friend, and until next Saturday.
Goodbye.